In three, two, one. Today on the show, I am pleased to have Dr. Mike Simpson. Doc, thanks for being here, brother.
Thanks for having me, brother. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you betcha. You are one hell of an interesting dude. The dichotomy, the way that you've done your career from a high speed, low drag killing machine to a medic to or a medical sergeant. What the hell is a medical sergeant anyway in the States?
Yeah, so it's in special forces they don't call you an SF medic. Although colloquially a lot of people actually say that. They say SF medical sergeant to make the differentiation that it's every slot on the team. Originally, when an A team was created back in the 60s, they had the medical specialist and the medical sergeant to differentiate who was in charge. Now they just call us all the medical sergeant because pretty much nobody's on a team below the level of Sergeant E5 anyway. So they call it the Special Forces Medical Sergeant's course. There's not two different courses. So you're the SF medic, but you're also the SF medical sergeant is kind of the formal term.
So you're still fighting, but when somebody catches some shrap, you're in there patching them up.
Yeah, exactly. So traditionally, until GWAT, they didn't really have an adequate grasp on it. But once GWAT kicked off and they figured out what we knew in SF all along, which was essentially everybody on the team is an operator until somebody gets injured.
Yeah.
So which is why everybody who's an 18 series MOS, which is Special Forces, gets a combat infantryman's badge. The medic can get a combat medic badge, which is what I have because I got it as a physician. If he so chooses to pursue that route, but for being in combat, otherwise, that's the whole team would get CIVs, and then the medic could get a CMB. But they recognize now, as really it always has been, that everybody's an operator up and until the moment that somebody gets hurt.
It's rare in our regiment, the Patricias, but the occasional guy ends up doing cross training down in the States and gets Ranger qualified. It's
Mm-hmm.
rare, but I know a couple of them.
Yeah.
Really rare. Did you ever serve with any Canadians when you're in the Rangers?
I never. Well, I served with a Canadian expat who enlisted in the U.S. Army. Um, I don't never did an exchange with any Canadians, and I don't recall ever being in any schools with Canadians. We might have had some when I was in airborne school because we had a lot of Allied troops when I was in airborne school, and at that time I didn't know how to identify everybody's uniforms. Um, Deployed, I worked with some Australians, some Poles, some Italians, uh, some Norwegians, Germans. Uh, there were some Canadians on Mezi Sharif when I was there. Didn't do any direct combat missions with them though.
Okay. Now, the reason that I originally reached out to you, I was talking to you off air, is I thought you had you were in the world of medical trauma, as in PTSD, but no, you're you're a medical doctor. Now that
Mm-hmm.
is an interesting thing to go from the guy that's putting holes in them to the guy that's patching them up. What was the impetus for that for you, Mike?
So actually, the impetus, I was actually just talking about this the other day. So my initial impetus to become a medic was probably not the best reason to do so. I was a special forces demolition sergeant at the time, so I was blowing stuff up primarily,
Yeah.
and I was bored and I wanted to get away from Fort Bragg for a while. I was going through some stuff on a personal level, and I just didn't want to be around Fort Bragg. And at the time, the medic on my team had been kind of pursuing me for quite some time. Is, you know what, you really need to go to the medic course. You have a keen interest for this. So you have an analytical mind. I think you would do real well. And I decided, you know what, this is a way that I can do something a little bit different because I was getting a little bit bored in my current job, and I can get away from Fort Bragg, get my head together, and then come back to group. And I did. And then I found out that I really enjoyed medicine. I really enjoyed the medical aspect of it. I really enjoyed combat trauma. I liked being a problem solver when it came to medical things. Got to do a lot as a medic, got to treat battlefield trauma when I was in Bolivia multiple times, redeploying multiple times in the war on drugs, and working in that capacity as a medic, and even teaching a 10-week medic course to the Colombian counter narcotics battalion medics. All really, really, really rewarding. But I realized kind of early on that not only did I like medicine and have an aptitude for it, but when I looked around, I'm only 5'6". Keeping up physically in the Rangers and SF was always a little bit of a challenge for me. I think a lot of people probably had a little bit more genetic gifts when it came to athleticism, and that was always something I had to overcome. I never fell behind. I was never the weakest link, but it always took just a little bit more effort from me. I could outshoot a lot of people, couldn't outrun a lot of people, couldn't outlift or outclimb a lot of people, and I didn't see my way ahead as being in a leadership role on a team. Although I did get to deploy once as a team sergeant, I didn't see that as being a really good fit for me. And I've always been of the belief that whatever it is that you're really good at, number one, it's going to be more rewarding for you. So you're going to get more job satisfaction. So you're never really going to feel like you're going to work. And number two, especially when we're talking about a military unit, you kind of have an obligation to do what you're best at, because otherwise somebody else might end up doing the job and they're not the best person for the job. So I knew I was never going to be the best sniper, never going to be the best breacher, the best shooter, but I could be the best at providing expert medical care, expert trauma care. So I chose to pursue going to medical school with the goal all the time that I was going to become an emergency medicine physician specifically, so that I could come back to the SOF community and provide that care where it was needed at the tip of the spear.
One thing I'm curious to ask you, and I didn't prepare you for it off air, and I'm really curious about what your answer is going to be. I see a lot of guys that even going from Army to Air Force, the transition is a son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh my God, we just went from super high discipline, life or death stuff to the junior ranks are being lippy with the people 2-3 ranks higher than them.
Right.
I'm going to lose my mind.
Yeah.
And the former armor guys walking around wanting to throat chop everybody all the time because why are you doing it this way? Where's your discipline? Where's your esprit de corps? Now, I would imagine being a high-speed, low-drag operator. I mean, that's tier one shit. Transitioning into the medical community, has that been a similar challenge for you? Are you a bit of an odd duck?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a challenge. Now, I had the advantage, and I attended the Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is a uniformed medical school. So this is, just as we have the United States Military Academy at West Point, the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis, Maryland, and of course the Air Force Academy in Colorado. The USIS is, you would consider it a military academy to produce doctors. So, everybody already has their undergraduate degree, their pre-med prerequisites out of the way, but you're there to become a military doctor. So it's very military bent when you're going to it, and it has the advantage of I had classmates. I had two classmates who were also former SF medics. I had multiple classmates who had been infantry, who'd been in Ranger units. I had there was a PJ in the class ahead of me, a reconnaissance Marine in the class ahead of me. So we still kind of had that kinship and kind of an outlet to definitely kind of have a springboard off one another on how different it was. But they kind of give you a little bit of free reign at USIS, and they recognize that if you come from a prior service background, number one, they expect you to kind of be a leadership and kind of corral all these other second lieutenants. But they also recognize just that you're going to be kind of that odd duck. You're going to be a little bit different, and they give you a little bit of free reign for that. And it's an academic setting. So because it's an academic setting, you're able to kind of disconnect and not think of it as this is a military unit and that's why things are different. You can think of it as this is an academic setting, although it's still a little bit of a shift. It wasn't until residency that I really got exposed to what we call the AMED mentality, which is not a good thing. That's not a compliment. So Army Medical Command is notorious for being not the best, not kind of a second-rate military unit, and also a second-rate medical system at the same time. And that sounds terrible, probably sounds much more terrible than it is, but in a sense, it's true. I'm not saying that military medicine is horrific; it's outstanding, but just the way that it operates, not on a care delivery level, it's wonderful. On an administration level, it is a nightmare because it can't quite decide: are we a hospital system, or are we a military unit, or are we a mixture of both? And so you see just that. And during residency, I saw people who were wearing, much higher rank than myself, 05 and 06, lieutenant colonel and colonel, who wouldn't have lasted 3 days in any of the units that I had been in, who were all about themselves, not about the unit as a whole, very self-serving, not much on maintaining standards, overweight, sloppy uniform, not on time, not about what's the bigger picture. And it really bothered me. And I won't say that I felt alone in that, because we had a lot of prior service in my residency class. And even, again, we had a couple more former SF guys in my residency class. But that really concerned me, that this is what the future might hold for me. What ended up finally dawning on me that I wasn't the one who was wrong, and I wasn't the one that had to adjust, was when I interviewed for my post-residency job with the Joint Special Operations Command to get into the Joint Medical Augmentation Unit, or JMAU. I was asked in the course of that interview by the unit commander, "What's the worst unit you've ever been in?" And I said, "It's the unit that I'm in right now." And
Not
kind of
the question, not the answer they were hoping for.
Well, actually, that as soon as I said it, I thought, "Oh my gosh, I've made a mistake," because knowing full well that the unit commander knows a lot of the people who are my attendings and my staff in residency, but it was like a switch flipped in my head. And I said, "Here's the problems that I have with AMED, and here's the problems I have with the residency program." And I just went on a list of, people want to feather their own nest, not do what's right for the unit. People are dodging deployment. People are seeking jobs that look good on their resume instead of jobs that can best serve the military and the fighting force. And I have a problem with all that. And it's almost like that scene in Back to School where Will Ferrell says, "I blacked out for a moment there," while he went on a rant. I kind of did that. And when I came to, the unit commander was smiling and nodding. And he said, "That was exactly my assessment when I was a resident as well." And I got the job.
It landed well. You ducked the bullet.
Yeah, it landed well, because it's MedCom units, AMED units are not at all like the operational military. And it's something that's been talked about in the military quite a bit. Is it functional in its current form? Yes. Is it to me, is it a good example of what the military is? No, it's absolutely is not. And again, that's not to say that they don't deliver great patient care, because they do. It's just there's some problems there, and I don't see, again, I go back to my initial statement, is it's a kind of a poor representation of what a hospital system should look like administratively, and a poor representation of what a military unit should look like as far as selfless service and mission accomplishment.
You have such a wide range of training. It's extremely rare that an infantry guy, the high-speed, low-drag killer guy, goes all the way to medical doctor. During all that training, I mean, you've got the full gamut. You've got a ridiculous amount of scope within your training. Was there any talk about mental health, PTSD resiliency, or the signs to spot with your team members? Was there anything then, and is there anything now?
So when I went through the SF medic course, there was not. It was, we were trauma dogs, and that's what we did. And also a lot of austere medicine and kind of tropical medicine, diagnosing stuff on the fly, and kind of some of the weird diseases we might see. It wasn't until I was in medical school that I really started to see that. And I think that was something that was very well integrated into my curriculum at the Uniformed Services University. It's at the end of your academic time, right before you start your fourth year, you do a large scale field exercise. And in that large scale field exercise, one of the things that you're doing is specifically running kind of a behavioral health cell in the middle of what's supposed to be an extended battlefield. So you're dealing with troops who are coming in with issues from what they're going through, or issues that they brought to the table already, just manifesting in that setting. And I thought the curriculum there did an excellent job of addressing it and kind of preparing me for that. And of course, I had all the regular psychological psych rotations that all med students have my third year. And since this was the height of the war at that time, this was 2004, 2005 timeframe. This was a tripler hospital, and we had troops on the inpatient ward and seeing clinically outpatient who were there specifically because of what had happened to them in theater and how that was manifesting psychologically. So going forward from that, I think, because of the specific education that I had at USIS and the specific rotations I had at military hospitals, I think I was well armed for that going forward. And, and through my multiple deployments, it was something that I always had in my toolkit for the times that it was needed, as well as when I practiced in emergency medicine in an ER stateside, both at Womack Army Medical Center and at Carl R. Darnell Army Medical Center at Fort Hood.
A few episodes ago, I had a lady on the show, Lisa Sabatini, and she was the spouse of a Canadian soldier. He was active serving at the time. Marriage didn't work out, but the stress, the secondary trauma that she received from living with a guy really suffering from PTSD was so hard on her that the physical symptoms that she experienced included paralysis. She was physically paralyzed in a hospital bed from anxiety, like unbelievable. And as a medical doctor, I was wondering if you could speak to the link between mental health and physical health.
Absolutely. So there's a huge link, and it goes both ways. It really does.
Two-way link, yeah.
Yeah, we know that that people in the height of physical fitness, when they are faced with psychological trauma and psychological stress, are better equipped to deal with it. We are organic beings, and regardless of how you identify what some call the ghost in the machine, your psyche, the id, the ego, and the super ego, however you want to break it down. At the end of the day, this can be identified, we know, through spec scans and MRIs and everything else by biological mechanisms. So the things that you are feeling are when you're subjected to psychological stress and trauma, those travel by biological pathways. Now, unfortunately, kind of the answer to that has become biochemical in the form of, let's treat things, pharmacologically, because this is all just a chemical imbalance. Well, it isn't that simple either. It goes both ways. It's very, when you are psychologically stressed or exposed to extreme psychological trauma, it's only natural for your body to manifest that in physical ways, right? And one of the most common things, and we talk about this all the time, is at a young age, oftentimes children will manifest psychological stress or fear in the form of abdominal pain, right? I have a tummy ache. I don't want to go to school. I have a tummy ache. They're not lying about that tummy ache to not go to school. They're actually having physical pain, right? They're feeling that. They're experiencing that in real time because their brain is telling them through perception that there's a situation they want to avoid and that is uncomfortable. And it is telling them as they approach that through physical discomfort that that's a situation that they don't want to be in. And their body and brain are interpreting it in that fashion. So, physical manifestations of psychological stress whether through the extreme of what we call conversion disorder, where people actually can exhibit, like you said, paralysis, stroke symptoms, pseudo seizures, things of that nature. That's kind of the extreme edge of it. But basically, what it is you are mentally and psychologically having a difficult time coping, and that is manifesting in physical forms.
I remember even in basic training. So in the Canadian system, everybody goes through basic. Doesn't matter if you're the cook
Mhm.
or the combat guy. Everybody does their 10 weeks of basic. Basically, how to
Mhm.
salute and polish your boots.
Right.
So not a lot to it. Just acclimatizing yourself to the military environment. Not
Mhm.
hardcore at all. Um, but even with that, because it's such a big transition from civilian life, there were people who, one fella, his spine just twisted right up, and he couldn't move. He
Mhm.
was physically crippled because of his spine, not because of the training or anything that we were doing. It was the stress and the anxiety, and
Mhm.
that was it for him. How it manifested right to his spinal cord, that was it. Um, Now, I have said repeatedly at our peer support groups and on this show
Mhm.
that trauma recovery is an activity, not an event. It's not something that you
Mhm.
wait for. It's something that you've got to earn. It's something similar to even on one of your T-shirts. I was coveting as I was checking out your apparel page there. But you've got to do the work.
Mhm.
Now, you have stayed fit, really involved in mixed martial arts, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Mhm.
How important is that? Is strenuous activity to mental health?
Strenuous activity is supremely important, in my opinion, to mental health. Number one, it's an incredible stress outlet. Number two, it increases your endurance, both physically and psychologically. It continues to add to what I call your neuroplasticity, so your ability to cope with things under stressful situations. Um, and we know this both pre and post. So again, going into combat, people that were more physically fit tend to deal with traumatic events in somewhat easier fashion, because not only because they were obviously for obvious reasons their survivability was probably increased, right, but also the fact that they just had more overall resilience. The talking about the ghost of the machine again, your brain is the driver and this is the machine that it's driving. So if you want your brain to be able to negotiate traffic, you have to tune up that vehicle, and the vehicle has to be in proper running order, or it doesn't matter what the driver does, the vehicle is not going to respond. And that's going to, imagine driving a car that has not had its oil changed and is on three flat tires, and then trying to negotiate an accident at high speeds. It's going to be much more difficult. So who's going to feel that stress? You're going to feel that stress as the driver, because, oh my God, I'm trying to turn and veer out of the way, and the vehicle is just not responding. Um, all of these things work together in close conjunction. And then moving forward afterwards, the more time that you have to just sit and think about how frustrated you are, how anxious you are, that just continues to feed into that loop. If you are using something as an outlet for that stress and anxiety, you're working it off, walking it off, as your coach used to say, then you're basically burning that out of your system in a constructive way. Okay. You also start to anchor a little bit more, the pleasure centers of your brain start to associate that exercise with relief of that anxiety, and the exercise becomes more and more enjoyable as you move forward. So, unlike trying to numb it with drugs, trying to numb it with alcohol, all you're really doing in those cases is putting a very toxic pause button on whatever it is that you're dealing with. If you allow those feelings to kind of flow through you and channel them through Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, through boxing, through CrossFit, whatever it might be, you're allowing that energy to be expended in a constructive manner, and you're building stronger associations through those neuronal pathways in your nervous system.
Part of the challenge to a healthy lifestyle is some of the military culture, especially the drinking culture. And
Sure.
you hear people joke around, it's like, well, a bottle of Jack Daniels is my therapist, and that is so dangerous because it does the exact
Yeah.
opposite of helping.
Hmm.
It may feel like coping, but it's actually not. It's
Yeah.
making it compounds the problem so much.
Yeah.
And when it's just part of the culture with the drinking games and the toasting and everything else, it just spirals out of control sometimes. The
Yeah. Yeah. It really does.
alcoholism in first responder and veteran community is rampant, for largely because of that as well. It's
Yeah.
part of the id. It's like I am warrior. Part of being
Hmm.
warrior is mead and whiskey.
Yeah. Yeah.
And although I haven't had a drink since April 16th, and
Yeah.
I do miss a little bit of whiskey.
Yeah.
It's true, but I know I can't do it. It's
Yeah.
part of the recovery. Got to
Yeah.
stay clean.
Yeah. I drink three fingers of bourbon every Sunday with a cigar on the back porch, and just enough to kind of feel warm. And honestly, I like the taste of it, especially with a cigar.
Yeah.
I've got a six pack of non-alcoholic beer in my fridge right now because a company approached me about affiliating with them on my podcast, and never been a fan of non-alcoholic beer, but I like the way it tastes. And I'll come home from a hard day's work or a hard day at the gym, and I'll crack one of those open, uh, knowing that I'm not going to get tipsy, and I'm also not going to be then running to the bathroom all night long, because when you're my age, if you have a beer right before bed, that means 6 or 7 trips to the bathroom. But yeah, I agree. I've never numbed with alcohol. I keep minimal alcohol in the house. Uh, Alcoholism runs in both sides of my family very, very strongly, but it's never, and yeah, I did a lot of crazy junior enlisted drinking in my young days because that's how we pursued our off time.
Yeah.
But I've never gone to it, at least that I can remember, as an outlet because of depression in life, or difficulty coping or anything like that. And it's certainly not the answer. And like you say, I call it the toxic pause button, because you feel like you got to kind of skip over 6 to 8 hours because you changed your brain neurochemically. But really what you did is, you, let's say, you, on a scale of 0 to 100 of what you're dealing with, you entered that 6 to 8 hours at an 83, and you came out on the other side probably an 85 or 86. Okay. During that 6 to 8 hours, you felt like you kind of dropped down to a 50, although everybody who was around you felt like you were at a 98, right?
Yeah,
Because you just kind of got to
what you
skip
think is
over it.
extreme is just my operating level.
Yeah, and that's the excuse that we use, right?
Yeah.
And I do know guys who have gone to alcohol to kind of numb things, and used it for pain control, used it to blunt emotional pain as well, used it as a sleep aid, and these are all 100% the wrong answer.
Sleep aid is one of the most dangerous ones, and I so
Yeah.
understand it. I've been desperate for years to get a good night's sleep, and it's one of the most common issues with soldiers and first responders
Yeah.
is not getting a good night's sleep. Sometimes the nightmares are so terrible. I wake up in a jolt 2, 3, 4
Hmm.
times a night. And for some people, the only way that they've found anyway is through drinking their face
Hmm.
off, drinking until they black out because they
Yeah.
are that desperate for a good night's sleep and to be nightmare free for a night. And
Yeah.
that's almost an instant problem, like instant alcoholic if you're using it as a coping strategy, because it's not a strategy at
Absolutely.
all.
No.
So on your website, um, you promote the keto diet. Now, as a medical doctor, I find that interesting
Yeah.
because
I, I would I
there's
wouldn't
something I've
say.
been on it and I think it's great, but
Yeah.
you do have one as an advertiser.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So I have partnered with them. I partnered with F Bomb. I don't, and I actually haven't promoted them for a while, so I should probably take that off just because I'm not giving them the business that they expect. Um, I'm not an advocate for, I don't go around preaching the keto diet saying that everybody should be on the keto diet. I have been on keto programs for periods of time in which it helped me with some issues, helped get my sugar under control, um, helped me. I lost 30 pounds doing keto over the period of about 3 months, and came out the other end much, much, much healthier. Um, I don't. I try, although I try to get away from fad dieting, crash dieting, things of that nature. I do think that everyone can benefit from not necessarily keto, but from kind of cleaning up their bad carbs. And limiting your carbohydrate intake. And when you do intake carbs, they're of the healthy variety, right? So broccoli as opposed to bread,
Hmm.
things of that nature. And I tell people that if I'm having trouble with my weight, I'm having trouble with my blood sugar. I say, well, you know what? Get rid of potatoes, bread, and pasta. And I'm not telling you to go keto. I'm just saying get rid of potatoes, bread, and pasta.
Yeah.
And I am an advocate for, I think we need healthy fats in our diet, and that's why I associated with F-bomb. I like to eat. Uh, when I was on the cadre for Sheepdog Response, this was pretty common amongst us as a company when we were off doing remote training. Is we would have a big thing of eggs in the morning with bacon because we all love bacon, but also with a lot of chopped avocado to get that healthy fat because we were going right from there to then go grapple for 4 hours and then going right from there to go to shoot for 4 hours. So you do need healthy fats for fuel, and you don't want to do that with donuts, right? And get a sugar rush and then burn those off in an hour,
Yeah.
and all
Big
you did
Macs don't
is
quite cut it.
yeah, Big Macs don't quite cut it, but healthy fats are a good thing. And I think, I, since the time that I did a couple episodes on keto, I've kind of come a little bit, I've taken a little bit of a step away from that. I still think keto has a place, and for some people, it's a great thing to do, but I don't, moving forward, and I'm going to be writing a book soon. I don't push exclusionary diets, and keto is certainly an exclusionary diet. It's okay to be ketotic, I think, for periods of time, recognizing that we're omnivores. So I'm not a huge fan of the carnivore diet. I'm not a fan, actually I would say, at all of the carnivore diet, nor am I a fan of vegan diets. It's something that's kind of quasi paleo, where you kind of dip in and out of ketogenesis. But when I see these guys, and I've gone to these health conferences and fitness conferences, and there's actually an event called KetoCon. Where, go to these guys. I've been in ketosis for 15 years. It's like I don't know if that's necessarily where you want to be. It's it, I try to keep my carbohydrate intake on the low side, and if I'm doing a strength day and I come back and I do a urine dipstick, I probably won't be in ketosis. If I do what I did last night, which was 2.5 hours of jujitsu, I was probably a little bit in ketosis when I went to bed last night, just because I limit my carb intake to a certain extent.
Did you notice a difference in mental clarity while you were on keto?
Yeah, I actually, so initially you feel a little bit scattered, but then as you come through that, you actually start to feel very focused.
Hmm.
And I don't, at least that's how it was for me. I think that's not necessarily ketogenesis that's doing that. I think it's the most exclusionary diets. The reason that people feel great and the reason they lose weight is because they've eliminated some of the crap. So I think the mental clarity, I think, was a secondary effect of not having processed sugars and not having bread and gluten and a lot of other things that will slow you down and give you that fog. um, I don't think it was directly related to the ketogenesis, although some people who are proponents of the keto diet have made that claim.
Whether it was
um,
direct or indirect, I certainly noticed the mental
yeah,
clarity when I did it.
yeah,
And much like yourself, I did a couple of months, lost 20 pounds just like that. But what I found is it was just so heavy of a diet and expensive. Holy shit.
yeah.
It's not cheap. But it was so heavy of a diet that although it was delicious and I enjoyed
Hmm.
it and I felt good on it and I was skinnier, it just was not sustainable. It was such a heavy diet.
Hmm. Yeah, you're eating a lot, and you're eating, it's like, I'm hungry. What are my keto options here? It's and your options become pretty significantly narrowed, because whereas typically, you go, I'm hungry, I want a couple of crackers and cheese. No, like, well, I can only have the cheese, or I can
Yeah.
only have some sliced turkey, or whatever that might be. So yeah, like you say, it ends up, and that's, again, that's one of the reasons that you lose weight on it, is because you're like, well, where my options are, I don't feel that I can eat as much. So your caloric intake changes as well. We know that ketogenesis is highly used for some people with refractory seizure disorders. So we do know that it has a direct impact on the biochemistry of the central nervous system. So, you know, even though I've said I don't think that's the direct reason you get that mental clarity, I think that's where those claims tend to come from, and it's possible because I'm not a neuroscientist, and I'm not a nutritionist. I know from what I've read and what I've experienced myself.
Are you familiar with Dr. Jordan Peterson?
I am familiar with Dr. Peterson, and of course he's an advocate now. I don't know if he still is or was, of the carnivore diet.
Yes, he's an Alberta boy like I am. He's from
Yeah.
a small town, Valley View, northern Alberta, and he genetically linked has suffered from depression for a great
Yeah.
long time, as has his daughter, and they have both found respite with a great relief with the carnivore diet. And if they stray from it, the symptoms are back hardcore. So different strokes, different folks, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're not all the same. I mean, we're, depending on where we came from, where our ancestors came from, and where we are both genotypically and phenotypically, there's going to be some differences there. So certainly there are some people, like I know, getting back to ketogenesis, and ketosis. I'm somebody who can shift into it very, very easily. The first time that I did it, I was making ketones on day 2. And the guy who was supervising the diet for me said, that's impossible. You got to be, it's 10 days. I've never had anybody make ketones before 10 days. And I'm like, I'm making ketones on day 2. So I'm somebody who kind of readily shifts into that. Uh, Everybody, some people are more gluten sensitive than others. Some people are more prone. We know that type 2 diabetes has a very strong tie to genetics, and is more strongly represented in some demographic groups. So everybody's going to be a little bit different. And although I tell people that as a whole you should probably avoid uh, exclusionary diets. I think most people who are on the carnivore diet, if they added something like spinach to that diet, I think they would, not a more high level sugar, not even talking about apples, but something as simple as spinach or kale or something of that nature. I think they would find that they still feel great, and that would also help balance them out. When it comes to vitamins, when it comes to roughage and things of that nature.
Absolutely. I wanted to wrap up with you by talking about the sheepdog response. What is it, and what was your involvement?
So I was medical training director of Sheepdog Response. It's a company that was founded and is run by a close friend of mine, Tim Kennedy, former UFC fighter, uh, Ranger, SF sniper, somebody that I also worked with, of course, on Hunting Hitler, which is where most people, I think, know us from. Sheepdog Response is an organization that is geared towards providing everyday people with the tools they need to survive in this world when it comes to personal defense. So both that's armed and unarmed combat, so fighting as well as shooting, situational awareness, learning how to look for key indicators that you might be in a place you shouldn't be in, or that might be a person who looks to do you harm. Everything from setting up your home, setting up your car, setting up a proper first aid kit that isn't just for putting band-aids on scratches, but actually for saving a life. And that was my role as medical director, was to teach a trauma course for everyday people, how to put on a tourniquet, how to put on a vented chest seal, how to do a proper patient assessment, how to triage people, and everything of that nature. The company is still out there. I'm not with them any longer, but we still have a close relationship. In fact, I was at the range with them last week. out there shooting, and had the opportunity to be the one to teach a hip pocket class in tourniquets for all the attendees there. Company continues to do just great and amazing things, and I tell people all the time, if you have the means and the time, you should definitely avail yourself of one of their courses. They also teach courses for law enforcement as well, but I think where they do the most and make the most impact is in the people who've never served in the military, and this is all new to them, and they know nothing about fighting, nothing about shooting, and they go in there. They don't walk out as experts after 2 days, but they walk out with a solid foundation and awareness of what they need to do moving forward to be prepared if they encounter one of these situations.
Roger that. And if anybody listening wants a kick-ass first aid kit, check out Mike's website. And I will have backlinks to Dr. Simpson's website and some of the cool stuff that he has on this episode. Check out the t-shirts. They're freaking great. I think my personal favorite's the one with the unicorn on the front that says "Fix Bayonets." Love it.
Yeah, that's from the Range Rep guy. So that's not in my line, but that is who sells my T-shirts, and that's one of my favorites as well. In fact, I think I have one of those sitting around here somewhere.
Oh, so good. I think it's my new obsession. I'm going to have to start a collection of those. I've already shared a link to that on all my channels. Dr. Michael Simpson, thank you so much for being on Operation Tango Romeo today.
Thanks for having me, brother. I really appreciate it.
100%.